I came in a little bit late, so I'll reintroduce myself. I'm Cheryl Schwartz. I'm the Director of Service Learning for the College for Health Professions at Regis University here in Denver, and I'm also on the Colorado Service Learning Council. And today what we're going to talk about, a little bit of a different lens, and part of what we're going to talk about is adult learning specifically. But really from kind of a wide perspective. So some of you are going to be working, two of you are going to be working with adults or adult populations. All of you are adults, and so we're going to talk about kind of developmentally where you feel like you are, and how that translates into your facilitation skills. There's a direct connection between who you are, where you come from, where you are developmentally, and also your learning styles. So we're going to talk about learning styles and how that then translates into who you are as an educator, facilitator, and role model in these different facilities. So we're going to make that connection. Also, those of you who are working with young people are also going to have to navigate parents, right? And navigate the site supervisors, right? And also you're going to be co-facilitating. So everything that we talk about today, I want you to look through the lens of who am I as an adult, who are they as an adult, who are their parents as adults, the site supervisors, all through this lens of adult learning. We also are going to talk about specifically experiential learning and reflective learning. So our hope through more of a service learning, experiential learning model is that everything that you do, you're personally reflecting on. So our expectations through this whole process is that you're going to continuously reflect on your own experience, and so we're going to talk about reflection for you, but we're also going to talk about reflection with the participants. So not only doing activity, but being able to reflect on activity and what that means. And so we're going to talk about critical reflection. And then peer-to-peer facilitation, boundaries, that kind of thing. As Cody said earlier, some of the people with whom you work are going to be around your age or just a little bit younger. And again, some of them are going to be adults and or you're going to be working with their parents. And then of course the co-facilitative place as well. A lot of times we think of others through our own lens, through our own perception of who we think that they are. And in some cases, a lot of the who we think people are, so these are generational differences, and they're huge generalities, I might say. But a lot of times we look at this and we say, oh, I know that story. I know that story about the other. And what I know to be true is that this generation or these people or this social identity group, that this is their story. And it's based off of my perception of story. And my challenge to all of you this summer is for you to figure out a way to be in other people's story and to learn their story, as opposed to the perception of story that we want to put on them. And that's part of being a good facilitator. It's part of being in a service industry and being of service to others, is that we create space for another person's story. And so if you're coming into a group of young people, a group of adults, whoever you're going to work with, this organization that you're going to work with, if your perception is these people are this because this is what their organizational mission statement says, then you're already starting to tell the story of who they are. So here's a bunch of story. And the thing about story, just kind of one more piece about story, is that story is a way to keep ourselves safe. So we tell stories in order to understand sometimes, to try to draw connection and parallel, but it's also when we feel uncomfortable. If we feel discomfort, we try to box people up into a little box with a bow, and so we can try to relate to them, right? And that's kind of what these boxes are about. These boxes are a little bit of a story that gets told about the different generations. And so, but the story is kind of a human condition. So when I first started talking, all of you told a story about me. I don't need to know what it is. But all of you told a story about who you think I am, right? And again, that's how we try to understand and relate, but it's also how we find comfort. And so the challenge for the summer is if what I know to be true is that 90-something% of the young people in this program are on free and reduced lunch, the story I might tell myself are things about poverty, the things I might tell about where they might live, the clothes they might wear, right? Those are all the story that I'm telling. But it keeps us from understanding the true essence or the meaning making of who they are, right? So there's that piece. In working with adults, sometimes the story is about these generational pieces. And so if you were born in 1980 to 2000, then you're considered millennials, right? There's a lot of stories about millennials. I'm sure some of you have heard those stories. Some of you believe some of them, and some of you are like, not me, right? And because that's not all your story, right? And so, but there's some interesting tidbits about how some people learn, how some people view the world, how some people work, their characteristics, how they view technology, all of those kinds of things based off of their access to it at a certain point in their life. I did not have a computer until I was in a job in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. You know, I grew up with no technology. There weren't even in high school there weren't computers, right? So I grew up in an era where I had to have kids in order to learn how to use my phone, basically. And so that's the generation that I grew up in, is that we had to kind of do it for ourselves because there was no other way to do it. We had to go to the library in order to do research, right? Those were some of the pieces. So who that makes me as a learner and who that makes me as somebody who understands others is really different, right? And so it's important to just kind of note that some of these may or may not be true depending on the population that you're working with. But the reality is that all of us come to the table with different experience, life experience, technology experience, and whatnot. And so understanding, again, that story is a really important piece. What are your just general take about generational differences? And what do you think you're going to find in that this summer? Yeah.
Well, even something as simple as, like, I thought I was really young getting a phone in 8th grade. My other sister got for her first phone like in college because she was older, but now kids these days have them in 5th grade. So like technology is a huge part for the kids we're working with, and then you think about the parents and where they had it. So I think technology is really huge in general, generation differences as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how it shapes them.
It is, and the access too. So some of the people that you're going to work with have access to different things that others don't. And so that might be kind of interesting. So the access that you've had to things like education, technology, those kinds of pieces may be different or the same as some of the people that you're working with. And how does access change? So that is, in some cases, a little bit of a social justice question as well. So some of you are going to be working with some pretty disenfranchised or marginalized young people, and adults as well. And so what kind of access do people have? What kind of access do they not have? And how has that impacted their ability to learn? How has it impacted their ability to be able to hold a conversation that you're having that might feel over here to them, right, above their head? And so we have to kind of think about our audience quite a bit, right? So, other thoughts? Great. So here's just a couple little tidbits about adults and adult learning. Again, most of you are not working with adults, but you are working with each other. You're adults and you're working in an organization full of adult staff. And so some of these things might be helpful in terms of moving forward. Adult learners do tend to be pretty problem-centered and practical. So they do want to seek solution, to be in solution. They also want to navigate their own solutions. It's not unlike young people. Adolescents are very much the same way. So sometimes they think their solutions are really solid, when we as adults may look at their solutions and say, well, that's going to have a really nasty outcome, right? Either because we've already been through that, and so that's this balancing act in how much they should just do to find solution and how much guidance we give. And there's an interesting balance there, even with littles, right? We want them to be able to figure out a little bit of their own world, and at the same time create enough information, or at least provide enough information where they can navigate those solutions in an effective way. They're results-oriented and self-directed. And I think you'll find that with adolescents as well, to some extent. But adults, I work with almost entirely graduate students and doctoral students, and the reality is they're adults coming back to school. And they're incredibly self-directed, even in a really directed program. And so they want to own their own learning. They want to engage in their own learning with, again, enough information to be able to be successful at what they're doing. My sense is, and given kind of the comments earlier about being really independent and really kind of, what was the term you used? The steamroller. Yes, absolutely. So one thing that we need to think about is, even just in our own world as adult educators, is how often is my self-direction, again, doing for others that they really should be problem solving on their own, right? And so who am I as an adult teacher in this? So am I willing to accept responsibility? So if something doesn't go well, am I willing to just own that it didn't go well and move on? Or is it the shame and blame moment, all of that kind of stuff? So I think, again, these pieces are important to not only understand with the adults that you might come in contact with, either each other, the site, supervisors, and parents, but also if you are working with adult learners, just to know that this is really how adult learners are in the learning workspace. In terms of learning styles, it's important for us to understand learning styles for a couple of reasons. One is that all of you are going to be in a position of teaching something this summer. So understanding how people learn is really important for how you facilitate and how you teach. So you're teaching to the learner. It also says something about your teaching style. Have any of you done any kind of personality profiles, all those kinds of stuff? Which ones have you done? What's that?
Strengths quest.
Strengths quest? People styles, anybody do people styles?
Yeah, like the Myers-Briggs.
Myers-Briggs, absolutely. Colors, another one. Multiple intelligence, emotional intelligence, right? So there's quite a few different personality profiles that say a lot about who you are, not only as a person, but also who you are as a learner. And so what I'd like for you to do is to look at these different styles. So there's verbal, visual, musical, auditory, physical, kinesthetic, so kind of an experiential learner, a combination, so you actually do a lot of these. Solitary, you need to be alone. Social, you need to be with others. Logical, mathematical, it's easier to do reasoning and logical than it is to actually be experiential. Again, the verbal is that you need to be able to talk about it and hear it versus being able to see it, the visual learner, right? So what I want you to think about is, what is your learning style? Do any of you know your specific learning style or your combination of learning styles? Go ahead and give me an example, yeah.
I'm just like 100% a verbal learner.
Okay.
And teacher. And everything.
Okay. Okay, so who's another one? Yeah.
I'm a combination between kinesthetic, verbal, and visual, more on the kinesthetic side.
Okay. So we have a verbal and a kinesthetic. So verbal, tell the kinesthetic what you want her to learn. So give her an example of something that you want her to know.
Something
Just random. Pick it out of there.
When you're underwater basket weaving, you should probably say weave that is.
So it is a fun challenge. It will make you the best you can be at any field that you're going to go into, because it helps you really relate to and connect to other people and how they do their work. So it's going to be important for you, if you are going to be co-facilitating with each other at these sites, for you to be able to figure that out together. So maybe talk about your styles. If there's a complementary style between the 2 or 3 or 4 of you, that's great, because you'll balance each other out. So one person will give the verbal because you're verbal, and the other person will do a kinesthetic moment, and another person will be social because that's what they do. And that'll be a good balance. If all of you find that you are very similar in your styles, that's where you're going to need to branch out and challenge each other a little bit. But I can guarantee you that regardless of whatever team you work on, and all of you have to work with other people. That is the thing about being human, is you have to work with other humans at some point in your life. You'll be married to another human, hopefully at some point. Hopefully it'll be human, and hopefully it'll be, I don't, you know. But anyway, at some point, we're all connected to others. And so we have to figure out how to be with others. And learning styles is one way that we get there. Does that make sense? Good deal. So part of the kinesthetic thing is about an experiential process. And so I do want to just take a brief moment to talk about experiential learning. All of these sites are wanting some form of an experiential process. They want for their participants in their programs to experience something. So whether they are looking for a job and interviewing for jobs, they want people to truly understand what it is that they need to do as outcome and the ways to get there. And part of your role is going to figure out ways to experientially get people to that. So if you're going to be in an after-school program teaching health education or life skills or even recreation, those kinds of things, you're going to have to figure out ways to help the learner understand what it is that they're doing. So living through experience, not just telling somebody about something, but actually having them involved in understanding what it is through experience. And that is one of the expectations that the sites have for all of you this summer. It is also the way that people learn best. So even our most verbal and visual people, learners, need at some point to do practical application of what they're learning. And that's what experiential learning is about, is to take all of this information, whether that's theoretical or contextual, and to be able to actually apply it. And practically apply it into their real world. And so that's part of what you're doing. The other reality about this is that that's what your summer is about, is that you're learning skills that you're going to practically apply throughout the rest of your school days, throughout the rest of your career days, your life, all of that kind of stuff. That our hope is, our goal through this entire program is that you're going to take everything that you're learning and be able to apply it this summer, to be able to apply it on throughout the rest of your life. And so it's not just for you, but it's not just for the participants, but it's also for you as well. So that's what experiential learning looks like. How many of you have heard about Kolb, Experiential Learning Model? Has anybody seen this model? So this is a very expansive version of this model. Normally, this model, I just wanted you to see the bigger model. There's a lot of different components here. The ones we're going to concentrate the most on are the 4 top pieces: concrete experiential, reflective observation, abstract, conceptual, and the active experimentation. Those are kind of the key pieces to the Kolb learning model. This is how people learn and experience. So they have a concrete experience. They reflect on what that experience held for them. So let's say that you're working in a program where you're going to be teaching somebody some form of a life skill, right, in this program. They're going to have a lesson in that life skill. So what's a life skill that you would want to teach this summer? This is your chance to be creative, because you're going to be doing this if you're in the after-school programs. Yeah?
Maybe how to communicate with someone when they tell you that they feel like you've hurt their feelings.
Okay, great. So communication in particular, or specific, like kind of the overarching communication, specifically about how to communicate in conflict, right? And so the concrete experience is that we're going to do an activity where they're actually doing a communication skill that we've taught. So if we're looking at conflict resolution communication skills, for example, we would give them information about that skill. We would actually have them practice it. They would have a concrete experience, and then we would have a moment where we would actually reflect on that experience. So we would ask them questions about, how did that land with you? What did you learn? All of those kinds of things, right? And we would have that reflection then lead into that conceptualization about what it meant. So not only are they reflecting on it saying, wow, what I learned is that I'm a really horrible communicator, especially when I'm in conflict. Like, it was bad enough just having to tell somebody where I'm going tonight. But now all of a sudden I have to tell somebody where I'm going tonight at the same time that they don't want me to go there, right? And that creates conflict. And so I have to be able to take that moment, and I have to conceptualize it into my life, right? And then I have to continue to experiment, actively experiment with what I've learned in order to be able to experience it again, and maybe experience it in a different way. So if that concrete experience created conflict for me, I'm going to resolve it throughout this process to then be able to change the experience. And that's how this becomes a loop of learning, right? And so that's kind of our goal in experiential learning, is that we create experience, we're able to reflect on it, be able to conceptualize it enough to be able to experiment with it and move it into a place where it becomes different, right? And it becomes a really positive loop of learning. Does that make sense? Great. So as I mentioned, part of the process of learning is reflection. And so I do want to talk about reflection just briefly, and then what I want us to do is reflect on today. So you can actually reflect on what it is that you've learned today, how you feel like you're going to engage with it as you move forward this summer. So this is a critical reflection model. It's the Ash and Clayton Deal model. So deal meaning describe, examine, articulate, and implement. And so basically this is engage in service. It could be also engage in experience, engage in activity. Either way, there's an engagement. Part of this model is that you're going to describe the experience. That is our first step in the reflective model. So we're going to describe an experience, then we're going to examine the experience with reflection prompts based off of goals, and I'll explain that in a little more detail in a second. You're going to articulate your learning. So what did I learn? How did I learn it? Why is it important? And what will I do in the future because of it? And then you're going to implement whatever goals it was that you set. So whether that be personal goals, in a service learning, it's civic engagement, those kinds of things. So what I'd like to do is to use our experience this throughout today as a way to just process and reflect on experience to see where you're going to and how you're going to use this information that we've talked about today ongoing. So in the first one, let's just simply describe the experience. So it's the what, where, who, when, and why. So can somebody give an example of what it was that you learned? The where is here, so we don't have to cover that one. The who is all of us. But what I'd like you to do is to describe part of an experience that you've had today here at DU, and give it some description based off of number one there. So who wants to take a stab at the description? What is something that you've learned, and give some description to it? Why did you learn it? Yeah, go.
We learned about facilitation today and that different age groups need different focuses based on what they're learning and experiencing.
Okay, great, good. So you learned facilitation, great. So that is a description of what you did, right? The next step is to examine the experience through prompts and specifically through goals. So we could continue with our facilitation example. So what was the examination of that experience based off of a goal? What do you think the goal was of learning about facilitation? And where do you think, why do you think it is that we set that goal? So if the goal was to learn facilitation, why was it important?
So just kind of examining it, we all have probably a bit of experience with this, but it's just good to go over it like officially so that we can be good facilitators. So this whole day has just been kind of learning what a good model is so that we can become our own version of that.
Okay.
Kind of what my examination of it was.
Okay. Great. Other examinations of the day or of our specific model or the whole day? How many of you came in with a specific goal for yourself today? You had no idea what you were getting into. There's a lot of that. Okay, good. So the goal then was to know what you're getting into, right? And that's a completely viable goal, right? And so excellent. So then, if that was the goal of your experience today, was just to simply find out what have I gotten myself into this summer, right? That's awesome. So then the next, and also some of my challenges or some things that might be a learning edge for me. And so the next step is, what am I going to do because of that? So does anybody have a what's next for you? Yeah.
Just being mindful and planning for the programming that we're doing or the people we're working with as far as learning styles, how we're managing conflicts or behavioral problems, and just being able to cater to various needs and learning styles and not just do what's comfortable for us.
Great. Okay.
I was gonna say that to take the skills that we learned here today and everything that we got to be able to know about ourselves and what it's like to be a facilitator, and to apply those skills throughout the summer and to different situations that we might run into during this series.
Okay. Great. Good deal. And then this piece, the implementation piece, is the personal growth piece. So if you're going to take the skills that you learned into the workplace, into that, how are they going to grow? What will be the impact on them, and what will be the impact on you ongoing? So it's the personal and professional impacts. What do you think those impacts are going to be? Yeah.
I think I'm definitely going to learn what kind of facilitator I am. I'm really kind of excited to maybe not be the perfect one that I want to be at first. And I'm excited to learn through experience about how I can become that person. Because I feel like I try to see this facilitator that I want to be, but I truly am not going to know that until I'm doing stuff hands-on and everything. So.
Absolutely. Good. And that's an experiential moment, right? So, because you could read about how to facilitate all day long, and we could talk about it all day long, but unless you are actually out in these organizations doing it, you're not going to fully embrace that and also learn from it. So the goal being that if facilitation or working with different populations that you're going to be working with or different organizations is your learning edge, chances are by midterm, by the midsummer reflection and at the end, at our post-flexion, we're probably going to hear a lot about your story and what it was that you felt like you learned from that. And a lot of times goal setting, so part of this is about goal setting as well as part of process. And what's kind of funky about goal setting is that it's only our perception of outcome in this moment. The reality is that it could change on the journey. That was kind of the journey destination that was talked about earlier, right? So we can talk all day long about, here's our destination and this is what we're going to But the reality is that all of you are going to be on a journey this summer where those goals or that destination may really change for you. There may be some huge ahas, or it may be really confirming about just, I went in strong and I'm strong in this. This is me. And that's really great too. So it's just being able to understand that there's some openness that comes with critical reflection. Because the reality is that we don't always know what that's going to look like. But we need to go through that journey to figure it out, right? So here's just another piece about what critical reflection is. It really is a thoughtfully designed moment of critically looking at where we are, who we are, where we've been, what we've learned. Again, we want for you all to do that this summer for yourselves. So keep journals, keep it on your radar about what you're learning. It's an important piece, and we are going to be talking about it a couple different times this summer. It's also really important that we create space for the people that you're going to work with to do critical reflection for themselves. And so every time that you do an activity, it's important that we're asking some questions about what they learned and how they're going to what they learned, but also how they're going to implement it in their everyday life and all of those kinds of things, right? So even just the most simplest projects, it's great to be able to ask how things land with people, or what did you learn? Was this fun? Was it exciting? What was it that held you in this? And what did you learn about yourself? Critical reflection is not just reflecting after event. It's also about real-time reflection. And so that's a skill for you all as facilitator, educator, is for you to be able to, in real time, be able to say to yourself, wow, that worked really well, and this is something I want to hold on to, right? And so you're not just waiting until the end of the summer to reflect on that, but in real time, you can actually say to yourself, wow, that was really cool. And this is what I learned about myself in that, and this is how I'm going to continue to implement that. It's also, conversely, important to be able to say, that didn't go so well. And this is what I want to learn out of this experience, right? So in real time, being able to do that. And then to form solutions as part of reflection. So part of reflection is not just report out of what happened, but it's also what I learned is solution focused. If I knew that communication style I just used with this group did not land with them, and they were all over the place or falling asleep or whatever that was, my job then is to be able to figure out the solutions to hold people. And maybe it's that I'm being too didactic and too verbal, as opposed to really engaging people in the conversation, right? So, good. Any questions about reflection? Have you all done reflection as part of schooling, and either written reflection, debrief, all of those kinds of stuff? Good. So I think it's taking that experience and drawing it to what you're going to do. Now you're going to be facilitating that. And so think about all the ways that that's landed with you. There's also different ways to debrief that are more creative. So some creative reflection are things like, like using props for reflection. So if you're working with a group that's kind of shut down, it's great to use props to get them to talk. They come in the experiential education world, they come from everything from chickens to little rubber chickens to, they're called Chi-Chi cards, they're like little reflection cards. I mean, have you guys heard of these, so think about kind of your experiential education world and all the different ways that you get people to chat. I also use things like silly putty. I do all kinds of, Play-Doh. I mean, I get people to reflect in all different kinds of ways, especially because whenever we're having a kinesthetic moment, whenever we're kind of doing something with our hands, it's easier for us to be in our heart space and our head space, right? And so especially if you're working with littles, like if you have a talking stick or anything like that, anything that somebody can hold, all of a sudden they'll talk. And so it's just a way to get people to debrief in a way that matters. Okay? So Cody did cover some of these pieces, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. But it is really important that, especially during orientation, that you show up in a professional way. So what I would recommend is that you show up in professional attire, kind of business casual maybe even, for your very first meetings with during your orientation. You may or may not be with the participants of your program right away, but it's just like a job interview, right? We want to make a good impression. So maybe for that first meeting, and then at that meeting, ask them what attire is appropriate for working with their population. If you're going to be in some of these programs that are, running around and those kinds of things, they're going to tell you, yeah, please wear shorts because they're going to, and please don't wear your best ones because they're going to get dirty. And they're going to, you're going to have glue and paint and all kinds of stuff all over everything that you own. So, but ask them. Ask them about languaging, interactions, the appropriateness of things like the mentorship versus friendship. All of those kinds of things are still real, even when you're working with adults. And so those of you who are working with an adult population, or if you're thinking about how you're going to connect with parents, sometimes parents bond really well and really strongly with their adults, facilitators, or and that kind of thing. But it's important to hold that relationship, that mentor or that professional relationship with the adults in the program as well, and to set those boundaries as well. Social media applies to the adults just as much as it does to the littles or the young people and the teenagers that are wanting to have a close relationship with you. It's having just that personal space and those boundaries, professional boundaries. So, any